sexual abuse. So according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, which is a great resource, child sexual abuse is any interaction between a child and an adult or another child in which the child is used for sexual stimulation of the perpetrator and observer. So that covers a lot of things. A lot of people have kind of preconceived ideas of what sexual abuse is, and probably that counts as well, but there's more to it. And so we have both touching and non-touching behaviors. And touching is what people are most familiar with when we talk about sexual abuse. So touching behavior, or sorry, non-touching behaviors can include voyeurism, so trying to look at a child's naked body, exhibitionism, showing private parts to children, or exposing them to pornography. And abusers often do not use physical force, but may use play, deception, threats, and other forms of coercion to engage children and maintain their silence. And we'll talk about that, the process of grooming. Abusers frequently employ persuasive, there's the touching behaviors. I don't know why that came up so long after the other ones, but touching behaviors may include the touching of the vagina, the penis, breasts, buttocks, oral genital contact, or sexual intercourse. Abusers frequently employ persuasive and manipulative tactics to keep the child engaged. So these are grooming tactics. And grooming to us, if you're not from the world of abuse, it's when you're preparing yourself, you're getting ready. And so when we're talking about grooming in the sense of child abuse, we're talking about all the things that perpetrators do to try to gain access to a child, to gain their trust, to gain the trust of the caregivers around them, and make it easier for them to abuse children. So they can include buying them gifts, taking them on special trips, anything where they can create a bond between them and the child, or bond between them and the family, which can very much confuse the child and lead them to have a lot of mixed feelings about what has happened. So we have all these myths or facts, and I actually, we have a survey for them as well. So it says all of them here. So there's child sexual abuse is a rare event, true or false. Number 2 says a child is most likely to be abused by somebody they know, true or false. Preschoolers do not need to know about child sexual abuse and would be frightened if educated about it. If you scroll down, many children are quite resilient, and with a combination of effective counseling and support from their parents or caregivers, children can and do recover from sexual abuse. And the final one is number 5, talking about sexual abuse with a child who has suffered such an experience will only make it worse. So just to get an idea of kind of what our notions are when we come in, submit your answers to that. Fill them out myself too. I will put all of the different questions. And then, Chris, when it seems like enough people have answered, we'll kind of wait a minute. And I'm actually going to pour a little bit of my coffee. So my energy for today. And hopefully by next year, we'll all be in person, which I prefer. I think a lot of people prefer that interactive audience, and I actually can show more resources. I bring books with me that I use with kids. I bring the different toys that I work with, fidgets. I pass fidgets around, so that's nice to have. But hopefully we'll also have the option of virtual for people. So maybe both will be an option next year. But I am excited to see people in person again. All right, Chris, what do we have for survey results? Okay, so child sexual abuse is a rare event. That's false, and it looks like a lot of you knew that already. So what we know is that 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused by the age of 18. So unfortunately, it is not a rare event. And there are more than 42 million survivors of sexual abuse here in America. And those statistics obviously change all the time. The Advocacy Center is where I got that information from, which is also through Lauren's house, I think is the website I was using. Let me pull that up too in the background. And the other thing we know is that 30% of sexual abuse is never even reported. So the numbers that we have are even skewed for that. So it's unfortunately not a rare event. A child is most likely to be abused by somebody they know. Absolutely, everybody knew that. That's true. And the statistics show that 90% of children victims know their perpetrator in some way, whether it's a relative or somebody that is close to the family, a family friend. It could be, like I said, another child. There's child on child abuse. It could be a teacher, coach, just somebody that has come into their lives that they're absolutely familiar with. Preschoolers do not need to know about child sexual abuse and we'd be frightened to be educated about it. False. And one of the reasons we focus on young children is because they're the most vulnerable. They are the ones who, especially when children are nonverbal, can't really tell you what's happened. So we always want to start out early, just teaching them basics about the names of their body parts, what are private parts, who should be touching your private parts and who shouldn't be, appropriate and inappropriate touch. So just giving them general information about it doesn't have to be scary and can just be part of their education like everything else. Kids take in information as you tell them, and they don't know something is supposed to be taboo or not talked about. Obviously, they talk about poop all the time. They will talk about anything that they want to. So nothing is off limits for them. And everybody knew that many children are quite resilient. So children oftentimes going through a program, going through counseling, having support, that's huge, from their caregivers, do heal from sexual abuse, are able to move forward. But it's so important that they are able to talk about it, to process it, to get counseling for it. And that's a huge part of what helps people to move forward. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't tell about sexual abuse when they're children. The average age, I recently was attending another conference for women to disclose sexual abuse was the age of 52, and that was the average. So no, a lot of children don't tell about sexual abuse, and we'll get into that as well. Talking about sexual abuse will only make it worse. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's false, but I would say that we want to give kids the tools before we have them start talking about sexual abuse. Like, of course, disclosing it is one thing, but when we actually go to process what happened in a therapeutic setting, we give them a lot of information first. We just don't go head first into, so tell me what happened to you. We give them information about what trauma is, what sexual abuse is, what abuse is in general, what those symptoms look like. We give them ways to cope, so looking at relaxation. We give them words for their emotions. So we teach them about emotions and how it impacts their bodies. And then once we've given them kind of a toolkit of support, then we can start going into their narrative or kind of their story of what happened to them. Okay. So let me go back to where we were. So when we're talking about behaviors of sexual predators, let me make sure that's, I'm just going to put them all up at once. Oops. So when we're looking at sexual predators, their behaviors is that they are targeting the victim. They're looking for somebody they feel that they can get access to. So oftentimes when they're looking for a victim, it's who can I gain access to? Who do I know the parents of? When I'm working with children, that's one of the questions they ask themselves is, why me? Why did they choose me? And there are some things that we know that make children more vulnerable to sexual abuse, but one of the main things is just having access to that child. So they're trying to gain the trust of the child. They're trying to gain the trust of the caregivers, because that's how they're going to get access to a child. And when we talk about filling a need, oftentimes it might be a single parent who is working. Maybe they need somebody to watch the child or kind of help out. And so they're filling a need for that family. Hey, I can watch so-and-so while you go to the store, or I'll go to the store with them, grab groceries, we'll come back, like trying to gain access, trying to fill a need for that family. Then they're trying to isolate that child. They're trying to get them alone, which is why they might take trips with them, just them and the child, or spending time alone with them at the house while the caregivers are out. Eventually, it gets to sexualizing the interaction. So it doesn't start out that way. Oftentimes, people might think that a perpetrator just goes and sexually assaults on the first time. And that does happen in some cases, but more often than not, it's a process. So they call it grooming, a process of gaining control, because they want to make sure that they are able to control the situation. That's what it's about for them a lot of times, is they want control. And so they eventually see how far they can get. Can I get away with, touching your leg? Can I get away with grabbing your arm? Can I get away with kissing you, hugging you? How far can I go with this? And then it's that maintaining of control, which we see the different ways that they do that as well. Why children don't tell. So we know that the average age that somebody usually discloses is 52. So obviously, a lot of children are not telling. And it has to do with a lot of different factors. I won't read every single one of them, but sometimes when a child is young, it works to our advantage in that they don't know what abuse is. So they might slip and tell you what has happened to them because they don't know that it's wrong, or they don't know that it's abuse. So we've had children who, I think an example I recently read was a child who was late to school all the time, maybe like a 5-year-old. And the teacher asked, why are you so late? Why do you keep coming late to school? And they said, well, my dad has to lick my vagina in the morning. And she didn't use the word vagina. She used another nickname for it, but she didn't know that that was wrong. She didn't know that that was abuse. And so sometimes age works to our advantage, and then we're able to find out from children, because children will like to tell you everything and anything that happened to them. And sometimes it works to our disadvantage because they don't know that something isn't appropriate. If something is happening to you from a very young age, how would you know that that's inappropriate unless you were taught otherwise? The identity of the perpetrator, oftentimes it's somebody that they care about, that they love, and they don't want to get them in trouble. The type of threat situation, sometimes the perpetrators will threaten them. They'll threaten their parents, they'll threaten their family. They'll tell them that they won't be believed, that if they reveal sexual abuse, it will tear their family apart. Maybe they are a step parent and they're saying, if you tell, then your other parent's going to have to pay for all the bills alone, and they're going to struggle, and it's going to be your fault. So there's a lot of guilt involved, and there's a lot of threats involved that are both physical and non-physical. And they don't want to be blamed. Children are afraid of it being their fault, because a lot of times they feel like, I allowed this to happen. It's my fault. I should have known better, even though we know that's not true. And they're also experiencing trauma symptoms. And so a lot of them are avoidant. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. And so they don't mention it. So there are a lot of reasons why children don't tell. People often will rush to think that, well, why did you say something? And when we think about the amount of adults who have been through this that have not told, there's plenty of reasons why they haven't said something. And parental reactions could also be caregiver reactions, but a lot of times it's anger. It's anger that somebody has hurt their child, that there's guilt. Why didn't I know? Why didn't I see signs? How did I let this happen? And they become flooded with the same kind of trauma symptoms that the actual victim or survivor experiences. So it can lead to the same things of not being able to sleep well, not being able to eat, feeling that shame, feeling responsible, feeling sick to your stomach, to your having headaches and migraines. We know that trauma impacts our bodies. The body keeps the score. And so when you go through stress, I've gotten tons of stress migraines. And when you compound that by it being a trauma, that impacts you. That impacts you. And we see that with kids. We see that with caregivers. So this is for specifically teens and hold on, and kind of aimed at therapists. So we always talk about when you're talking with teens or you're talking with children in general, a lot of the times we're trying to remove the distractions. We're trying to spend time with them without their phone, without games going on, maybe just kind of chatting or doing something that's calm. A lot of kids like to talk in the car. So I've seen with a lot of caregivers and people that interact with kids, you'll be driving along and maybe it's because you're not making direct eye contact, or if they're afraid of getting in trouble, yeah, you have to keep driving. So you're not going to stop to, well, they hope not to say something or do something to you. So they kind of just mention things in the car. That happens a lot. When I'm talking with my kids in session, I talk about confidentiality, that I am allowed to have privacy with them and what privacy means, but that there's limits to that. And I always talk about the fact that I'm a mandated reporter. Everybody in the state of Florida is a mandated reporter as an adult. And so if they are in trouble, if they are being harmed, if they are being abused, or if somebody else is being abused that's a child or an elderly person or a disabled person, I have to tell, like I have to keep people safe. And that's kind of the message of, I want to make sure you're safe. You may not like how I go about it, that that maybe you don't want to tell about this, but we have to keep you safe. We have to keep others safe as well. With teens especially, if you are not familiar with the slang, don't use the slang. They can tell from 100 feet away that you are not comfortable with the verbiage they're using, or and also you don't want to use jargon or words that they don't understand. So kind of keeping it at that level. And I say that with parents as well, with any client, any person you're dealing with, you want to meet them where they're at. So kind of explaining things in a way that they would understand. And we want to make sure that we're using inclusive language. So we have one of the most vulnerable populations are LGBTQ youth and adults. And so using language that is inclusive of all of the different preferences people have for gender identity shows that you accept them, that you can be trusted and they can talk to you. And so instead of saying, do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? If, I see the opposite sex there, are you seeing anybody? Are you in a relationship? So just kind of general questions like that help. Sorry. So people often wonder and they ask, what is healthy sexual development in children? What does that look like? When should I be concerned? When is it a problem? So we're going to look at a couple of different age groups. When we talk about preschool, so that could be 0 to 5. So children under 5, common things. And if you've been around children, you've heard it. They know the difference a lot of times between male and female parts. And they may talk about it like, I have a pee-pee, they have a penis, or, anybody remembers Kindergarten Cop from 100 years ago, girls have a vagina, boys have a penis. They use bathroom talk. They talk about pooping and peeing. A lot of times they talk about pregnancy, birth, because maybe their parent is pregnant or they're going to have a sibling. So they're very inquisitive about things like how's that baby getting here? They will actually stimulate themselves. So there's different times in our lives where we go through kind of sexual stages. And one of them happens when we're younger and we discover that we have genitals. And maybe by mistake, we were touching them, we discover that feels good. And so they might stimulate themselves. And so I often have parents and caregivers freaking out because they think maybe something's happened when a child is self-stimulating, but oftentimes it's just a discovery thing and they discover that feels good. And then the safety planning for that involves talking to them about, that's a private thing that we don't do around other people, that we only do in private, like in the bathroom or our bedroom. We don't have other people do this for us. And also kind of giving them guidelines of where it's appropriate and inappropriate to do it, and that also, not to harm themselves in doing it, but there's little phases that they grow out of where they will, explore their own bodies. And then, kids love to show off. So they'll, show you their shirt up and be like, look, look, look. And they're showing you their different body parts. And it's a very innocent thing for them. So what's uncommon at this age, what we would be seeing red flags for is discussion of actual sexual acts, like thinking about things that kids shouldn't have knowledge of. So they shouldn't know about what like actual intercourse looks like, or different positions for intercourse, or certain language that you wouldn't be exposed to at 0 to 5. Like you wouldn't be hearing this, you wouldn't be knowing about this unless you were seeing it or hearing it discussed. And then contact experiences with other children. So we might see kids kind of like, smacking each other on their butt, or kind of pointing at each other. You show me, I'll show you. But actual contact with other children, rubbing other children, touching other children is not something we commonly see. It's not something that that would be like healthy sexual development, and our red flags should go up for that. When you're looking at elementary school age, common things happening there is that puberty is happening at the end of that part. So they're having questions about changes in their bodies, about menstruating, about pregnancy, more advanced questions. They are experimenting, and the thing here is with kids of the same age. So they may do, like kissing, or kind of like exposing themselves, or kind of like a role play of house. They may still be self-stimulating at home or other private places. And so those are all pretty common things that we see in that age group. What we don't see, again, is discussion of sexual acts. So while they may want to know about changes in their bodies, and they may be, trying to experiment with like kissing or hugging, or, playing house or something like that, they still don't know about actual sex acts and certain sexual behaviors that they're just not exposed to, that they wouldn't be exposed to unless it was happening in an inappropriate way, or something they got a hold of. And again, use of certain sexual words. And so when we start hearing certain things, you think to yourself, like, where could this be coming from? Like if they're not gaining access to the internet somewhere, or coming across it on the television somehow, maybe we don't have our parental safeties on, like where are they learning this language? Where are they learning this behavior? And finally, when we're looking at our adolescent clients and children, common things, now they're dating, they're talking about social relationships, they're talking about whether or not to have sex. We know we don't think about that, or we don't want to think about that a lot, but that 13 to 16-year-olds, these children are becoming sexually active. So it's something that is already on their minds, that their friends are talking about. They could be talking about self-stimulation in private still. So that's where children get into the final stages of sexual development. And again, experimenting with peers of the same age. So we want to make sure that like that healthy behavior would be to be attracted to somebody of your same age group. And it could be kissing, fondling each other, like rubbing each other's bodies. We're interested in other people's bodies, other peer bodies. And like I said earlier, a third of the population is engaging in sexual intercourse at this time. So anybody who's kind of afraid to talk to their child about this, or engage with children about this, it's happening. So we need to make sure that they're educated. What's uncommon, and what's usually uncommon as we go along, is sexual interest in much younger children, or there being like a huge difference in age. So if you have a 13-year-old that is, acting out or fondling an 8-year-old, that's a red flag there. That wouldn't be something that normally you would be attracted to. You would be attracted to somebody of your own age, or wanting to experiment with somebody of your own age, and not such a large age gap between them. So when we talk about sexualized behaviors, a lot of times when we're safety planning, we're trying to find out if the child is acting out sexually, if they're doing anything that might be a trauma response to what happened. So in general, there's some typical childhood sexual play and exploration. And things that are typical are children of the same age, kind of playing together regularly, and they are kind of the same physical size as each other. It's usually spontaneous, unplanned, it's infrequent, it's voluntary, and that that both the children agree to these behaviors of like showing each other private parts or kissing or touching each other, and neither one of them seems uncomfortable or upset by what happened. And also it's easy to stop. So when caregivers tell children like, that's not appropriate, you're not supposed to be doing that, that is something for adults, that it's easy for them to move forward and be like, okay, like we didn't realize, we didn't know, and stop that behavior. So when we get into problematic sexual behaviors, these are the times when we should be concerned. So if a child is doing something that is way beyond their developmental stage, for example, like a 3-year-old attempting to kiss an adult's genitals, that is not age appropriate, that is not developmentally appropriate, and that isn't something that they would have normally tried to do and help the sexual development. So we know that obviously that is something that doesn't fit. If it involves threatening people, trying to be forceful, trying to be aggressive with other kids, so doing kind of sexualized things, but doing it in a very aggressive, forceful way or threatening. That could be them mimicking the perpetrators or kind of acting out what's happened to them. Again, if that huge age gap is there, so you got a 12-year-old playing doctor with a 4-year-old, that is not how that works normally when we're talking about playing house or playing doctor. You're working with people of your same age, you're interested in seeing people of your same age. And also if it provokes strong emotions in the child, such as anger or anxiety. So we're seeing just really behavior that or emotions that don't match what's going on, or behavior that doesn't match. And that's when we start to be concerned and wondering, you know, if there is something else going on. So some possible factors or reasons behind sexualized behaviors. Some children who are exposed to traumatic experiences such as abuse, but it could also be other types of trauma that they're involved in. Children who are exposed to domestic violence in the home, or they're exposed to adult sexual activity or nudity in the home. So that could be seeing caregivers having intercourse, that could be seeing it on the television, seeing it through the internet. There could be kind of inadequate safety about modesty or privacy in the homes. And so some people grew up in households where it was very open and people walked around naked. And so not that that is wrong, but there might be not adequate safety about that or information about that. And also inadequate supervision in the home. So maybe parents are working, maybe they are suffering from mental illness, maybe they're suffering from substance abuse, and so just not around to be providing that supervision that children need. So we talk about what do we do when a child, when we find out that a child is engaging in these problematic sexual behaviors. We walk in and we catch children like on top of each other, or kissing or groping, or doing something that we don't want them to be doing. And so remaining calm is difficult. So it's kind of like going against your natural urge of like screaming and shouting and freaking out. But we try to tell people to stay calm. Like, we want to find out what happened. So, you know, just take a second to collect your thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts at the time. You know, just take some deep breaths. You know, you want to make sure that you have the children, you know, get dressed if they're not dressed, and get them into another room, get them kind of separated, or get them away from that area so that you can talk to them and find out, what are we dealing with here? Is this a problematic behavior? Is this a concerning behavior? And so you want to ask open-ended questions, meaning you're not trying to lead them like, were you doing this? Like, in saying X, Y, or Z. So what were you doing? Because maybe if they're very young, they don't understand what they were even doing. Where did you get this idea? Like, where did you see this? Did somebody teach this to you? Or again, that's leading, but trying to find out, like, how did they come up with the idea of doing this behavior? How did they learn about it? And that will lead to hopefully them telling you that they saw it, or somebody showed them, or somebody told them. And how did you feel about doing that? Like, did that feel uncomfortable, or did that make you upset? So trying to figure out how they got to that place of doing what they're doing. And then we talk about safety planning. So when we know that children have been abused, or that they are acting out sexually, that they're having concerning sexual behaviors. We want to step in and right away set some safety rules, set some boundaries to protect them. Again, remaining calm. So we're trying to provide education for children. We're trying to not shame them into not wanting to talk to us about their behaviors. And most likely they're responding to abuse or trauma that's happened to them. And so that might be one of the ways that they are showing what happened to them. And unfortunately, it's a way that is, inappropriate and unhealthy. But the more that we can remain calm, the more likely the kid is to tell us the truth and to tell us what's going on so that we can help. Basic things to discuss with safety planning is implementing rules about private parts and sexual behavior, both inside and outside of the home. So even things like, we only get dressed in our bedrooms or the bathrooms. We keep the door closed when we're getting dressed. We don't walk in on other people. We knock. We wait for them to say, come in. Teaching them about their private parts and proper names for their private parts. Teaching them what is appropriate and inappropriate touching. So safety planning is a lot of education and setting kind of boundaries and rules so that kids know what's appropriate and inappropriate. A lot of times utilizing different strategies to prevent and reduce those behaviors. So redirecting them, finding a way to get their needs met another way, praising them for using coping skills, praising them for making the proper decisions about, not stimulating themselves in the living room, that, thank you for going in private to do that, and that you didn't involve anybody else, that it was just something that you did privately. Thank you for telling me that something was going on that was inappropriate. And addressing just different sexual topics for their age group. So we want to keep everything age appropriate, and you can kind of change the language that you use, the way that you explain things, but we want to make sure that we're giving them that education so that they know, because they can't do better if they don't know better, basically. And one of the issues with teaching them the proper names for body parts is that other people will know faster if something's going on. So if you're telling a child to call their private part their Lala or their flower or whatever it is, they might be trying to tell an adult something's happening and the adult doesn't quite understand what they're talking about because they're using words for their private parts that that adult isn't familiar with or doesn't understand. And then through things like therapy, parents and caregivers can learn about prevention strategies. And we teach kids a thing called know, go, tell. And basically when we're talking about preventing sexual abuse or preventing it from occurring again, we go over with kids kind of how to approach somebody who might be trying to touch them inappropriately, of, yelling no, like getting away from them. So kind of the no, go, tell is just a shortcut for verbalizing, no, don't do this, trying to get away from the situation, and when they can, telling somebody who is appropriate. One thing that helps is strengthening the communication skills for children, and strengthening the communication skills and the relationship between children and caregivers so that they are comfortable talking to you, that they actually have time to. So whether that be tucking them in at night and kind of asking them how their day went, checking in with them during the day, chatting with them on the way home. Like, you want to give them the opportunity, kind of keep it open so that they know that they can talk about it. There's a space to talk about it. We help kids with impulse controls, how to redirect some of the feelings they might be having. We help them with proper social skills, what's inappropriate and appropriate for interacting with people and children. And one way to help reduce stress is to help them understand what they're feeling. Like, what is anxiety? What is frustration? What is fear? Because oftentimes kids have a very limited vocabulary for emotions, and giving them more words so that they can, tell you, like, I'm frightened versus I'm just a little bit scared or cautious. I'm sad versus I'm depressed, or I'm devastated. So giving them more vocabulary to describe what they're feeling. And also we have to worry about the safety of other children involved, because other times there are siblings in the house or there are peers at school. Um, so to help with that, we want to make sure that we're getting the child the appropriate treatment they need to address the issues. So if they're showing these symptoms, getting them into counseling so that we can discuss those things here and help the family come up with a plan. We want to make sure that they have appropriate supervision. So if we know that these kids are acting out sexually, we need to be sure that the school is aware of it, that the teacher's aware of it, and so that they know not to have this child alone with other children, or that there needs to be extra supervision, especially during those unstructured times like recess and lunch. Inside the home, we want to make sure that we have a better supervision of the child. That may include changing the sleeping arrangements of where the child's sleeping. It may be putting them in a separate room from other children for sleeping. It's also setting rules when kids are together, like when you guys are playing together in your room, you don't close the door. That's one of the rules, is that we don't close the door. I want to be able to see you guys. Coming up with activities that they can do together. So making sure that they have other behaviors they can be involved in, like playing games or doing Play-Doh or putting together Legos, so kind of creating structure for them in that way. And setting rules for everybody in the family so that it doesn't sound like we're targeting the victim or the child that's acting out. Like everybody's got to follow the same safety rules. So just like you can't walk around the house naked, like nobody else can. So we're all following these safety rules to protect ourselves. Some of these we've gone over. So teaching them the appropriate private part names. Like there used to be a time in the 80s, probably when I was growing up, where there was a lot of stranger danger talk. So the fear was this person that you don't know, probably in a white van, offering you candy or a puppy or something like that. And those were the people to be afraid of. And we know that unfortunately, that's not the case. That's not the way that this works. And so letting children know that, yeah, like we should still be afraid of strangers, and we don't want to let our guard down and have safety with them, but that it's not just people that you don't know that could be inappropriate with you. So we're teaching kids about okay and not okay touches. Sometimes we call them safe or unsafe, appropriate or inappropriate. We used to use the language of good touch versus bad touch, but we stopped using that terminology because there are some touches that might feel to you biologically that, you know, self-stimulating feels good, or somebody stimulating there feels good, but it's still inappropriate. So we wanted to kind of remove the language around that so that they didn't feel guilt of, well, it felt good, so maybe it wasn't abuse. So that okay, not okay touch, and appropriate touch. And then most importantly, we teach kids that their body belongs to them. I literally have books that are titled that are in charge of who gets to touch them and not touch them, that they can even have a say in, like, I don't want to give hugs, or I don't want to give kisses to Aunt Mildred or whoever it is. And, you know, still being able to be polite and to be kind, and having them be in control of the way that they show that. Let's see. So we've got some more tips. So make sure children know that adults don't need their help. They don't need their help washing themselves, going to the bathroom. They don't even need help with directions out in the street or locating a puppy that is lost. So I always often talk to people about that, of like, adults don't need children's help with things like that. Like, they can get help from other adults. So if somebody's asking you these types of questions, or wants your help, or says that they need you to do such and such, like, they need to get another adult to do that. That is not something for them to be asking a child. Teaching them how to care for their own private parts kind of early on, so that they don't have to rely on somebody else to help them when they're going to the bathroom or taking a bath. Still having supervision, you know, making sure that, you know, they're okay and that they're safe, but giving them that independence to protect them. Again, we talk about educating children. One of the things we talk about are good secrets versus bad secrets. So sometimes it's secrets versus surprises. So a good secret or a surprise would be something that you don't have to keep forever, like somebody getting a gift. Eventually, they're going to open that gift and get it, or somebody having a surprise party. We're going to go to that party. So, with surprises and with good secrets, it's something that usually has an end date and doesn't last forever. Or, it is okay to, not tell everybody who your friend likes. Like that's an okay secret to keep. And then bad secrets. So things that you're supposed to keep forever or that are not okay. And so kind of teaching them that there are some secrets that we need to tell people about. And to kind of trust our instincts. So this goes for children and for caregivers. Like if you feel uneasy about somebody, like leaving them with your child, about you just don't have the gut feeling is there. Like trust your gut feeling. Like you could be overprotective, but that's better than feeling guilty later if something does happen. So kind of trust your instincts. So post-trauma, so if a child has been through sexual abuse, parents, caregivers, anybody that's in that child support system, we're their role models. So we want to try and model, how to be calm, how to be relaxed, teach them how to kind of deal with their emotions, to take disclosures seriously. A lot of times it's shocking to us. So we don't want to believe it happened. Like, are you sure? Like, you sure they weren't just trying to grab this and they accidentally touched you? Or are you sure that's what happened? Because we don't want that to happen to them. So we're trying to look in our mind for any way that maybe this wasn't possible. But at the same time, that might be making the child doubt, thinking they aren't believed. So, take it seriously and just kind of find out, what do you mean? What happened? And giving them time to actually tell you what they know. And some kids don't remember details. And that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means that either it might have been a long time ago. They are showing trauma and they don't remember everything. We don't prompt them for information like what happened next and tell me, like kind of like pushing them, pressuring them. And just kind of listen. Like children will tell you in their own time, or they'll give you enough information that you can find professionals to talk to them about it. And we also place the responsibility, it seems pretty natural, on the abuser. Like you are not responsible for what an adult did to you or for what another child did to you that they shouldn't have. And just the idea of being present, being available, being patient. This isn't a short process. This is a long-term process. Okay. So we often try to tell people to stay in the middle. That's very hard. Sometimes people want to overreact and just get very, very upset because it's an upsetting thing. Other people tend to minimize, like I was talking about earlier, where they're saying like, are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't this? Like, maybe they were just playing around with you, because we want to encourage them to tell us what happened, to tell us how they felt about it. And when regressive behaviors occur, a lot of times kids who go through trauma will regress in how they act. So acting more childlike or baby-like or needing more help from you. And it's that idea of, children and babies get help. So if I feel like I need that extra support, maybe I start acting like, no, I don't know how to, dress myself. I don't know how to comb my hair. I don't know how to wash myself. And recognizing that as a trauma response and kind of being patient with them, but being like, no, like you know how to do this. And like showing them that you're still going to be there and care for them and support them. And they can still give themselves a bath like they were able to 3 days ago. Kind of boosting that self-esteem, because they oftentimes have a very low self-esteem when this happens, is that letting them know that they are loved, that there is nothing wrong with them, that they are not responsible, that they are cared for, that they are valuable, that what happened to them doesn't make them any less worthy, and making sure that you surround yourself with a strong support system, because if you're giving all of your energy to this child, then you also need to get it filled up from other people in your support system. And if this is something where it's a case that's in the news, kind of avoiding media exposure, trying to limit that for the child so that they're not exposed to it. So some of the things that prevent children from having a lot of negative consequences from abuse, so some things that help to minimize those negative consequences, is that support. So that caregiver support, that belief in them. I believe you. I know that you're telling the truth. Having a good self-esteem, so kind of helping them to build up that self-esteem. Having ways to cope with it, so having ways to relax when they feel nervous, having ways to get out anger when they are feeling upset about what happened. So making sure that they are learning the skills through counseling, or that you're practicing the skills at home, making sure that they're in good health otherwise, with those stomach aches, those headaches, and kind of making sure that it's not anything else, making sure that they know that that might be a reaction to trauma that happened to them. Kids that have good social skills, have peers, have friends, have positive relationships. Those are the kids that experience less of those negative consequences of abuse. And kids that get that age-appropriate independence, so not sheltering them so much that they are afraid, that they feel like there must be something wrong with me, like I can't even, cross the street by myself. Like we want them to not be afraid all the time. We want them to have safety, but when we want them to know that they are responsible, that they are independent, that they can do things, so they don't kind of crawl into a shell of themselves and think that because this happened to me, or it could happen to me, that I can't be independent, that I have to be dependent on my caregivers. So children that have a secure attachment to their caregivers, meaning that they have a healthy attachment, that it's somebody that they trust, that they can count on, that is not harming them. Being in a household that actually has structure, has rules, has expectations, having people in our extended family that are supportive, having parents that are also taking care of their own emotions, whether that be through their own therapy and practicing it themselves. So when parents show that they can feel the emotions, like I feel upset about what happened, like I'm not mad at you, but I feel upset that this happened to you, and this is what I'm going to do about it. And so you're modeling for them how to deal with those emotions when they come up. Having safe housing, having those basic things taken care of for children, and being involved in a spiritual community if that's something that's applicable to them. So having even more support from neighbors, from religion, from churches, from groups that you're involved in. And so one thing that people often ask is, how do we know that somebody has been abused? What might be the signs or the symptoms so that we know to be on the lookout for them? And there's different categories, and every child reacts differently. So no single symptom is going to say or indicate that sexual abuse has happened. But there's behavioral reactions, there's emotional reactions, physical reactions. So those behavioral signs are those sexualized behaviors we talked about earlier, the ones that aren't part of healthy development sexually. Kids that have been through trauma, all types of trauma, will oftentimes have nightmares, have night terrors. They'll go through harming themselves. So there could be that non-suicidal self-injury, that could be the cutting, the scraping, the burning, harming themselves in any sort of way. Is a sign that something has happened. Aggression. So there's kind of like age appropriate aggression, or aggression that we would see that would be typical with kids. And then there's something that's a lot more forceful, like we talked about with even the sexualized behaviors, being aggressive with them. Sometimes it's impulsivity. So not thinking about things before they do them, which impulsivity is a symptom of a lot of things. So again, don't base it just on one symptom. Could be changes in school performance. So maybe because they are suffering from trauma, they can't concentrate, they can't focus, they keep having those memories or thoughts come into their head, and all of a sudden a kid who is an AB student is now failing subjects that doesn't make any sense otherwise. It's not as though they are having difficulty with grasping a concept. There doesn't seem to be any other reason for it. So that might be a sign that they're suffering from some kind of trauma. Changes in eating habits, which kids go through. So again, no single symptom is going to indicate it, but all of a sudden eating much, much less, not wanting to eat, overeating, hoarding food, not wanting to hang out with people, not wanting to do the same things they did anymore, no longer wanting to go over to a friend's house to go swimming, not wanting to go to parties, not wanting to go out with people. That pathological self-soothing, so they kind of do the certain things. It doesn't have to be the self-stimulating ones, but just like you kind of see them like that rocking constantly, or rubbing their hair constantly, something that they weren't doing before, or something that seems out of character for them. That startle response, so somebody that's been through trauma, that's been frightened, will easily startle. And then we see destructive behaviors where it just doesn't make any sense, where they're acting out in an abnormal way. We can't find any other reason for it. Nothing else seems to make sense for why it's happening. That could be a sign of trauma happening, of abuse happening. Let me get back to the screen. And we also have emotional reactions. So disassociation is one way of like the self trying to protect itself. So it's kind of feeling disjointed from yourself. So they all of a sudden aren't really having emotions as much. They seem much more kind of flat in their expressions, not having a normal reaction to an event like they used to, not being excited like they used to, or sad, just kind of seeming to separate themselves from their emotions. Things could trigger them. So there are a lot of things that trigger us from different traumas. And as caregivers, we might not know what those things are. And all of a sudden this kid's having a meltdown and we can't figure out why, but it could be something simple as a song that came on, a scent that they recognize from the perpetrator, seeing somebody that looked like the perpetrator, seeing a car that looked like the perpetrator. So there are so many things that could cause it, but we don't know what the triggers are because we don't realize something's happened. Again, that inability to concentrate a lot of the times, that irritability, and again, these are symptoms of other things that could be wrong. So it's not just these are just symptoms of sexual abuse, but that hypervigilant, which means like always on guard, always looking out for their safety. So, making sure that they know where the exits are in the room, constantly looking at people, kind of, trying to see if they're safe or unsafe. And we see this a lot in adults too. Always being aware of our surroundings to like a hyper degree. Difficulty describing their emotions, not knowing how they feel, having that low self-esteem we thought about. Distorted thoughts of like, I'm a bad person, I'm no good, I'm ugly, the whole world is bad, nobody can be trusted. Just the thoughts just don't make any sense, or are very kind of black and white. Feeling guilt, feeling shame, feeling anger, withdrawing from people, withdrawing from friends, and not really showing any more happiness, not really showing kind of positive emotions. And the physical part are the actual signs of abuse, which is why I talked about that child protective team of getting the medical examination, getting an exam to see if there are signs of abuse. So does every child who's been through abuse need therapy? And the answer is no, that sometimes children are not exhibiting trauma symptoms. So while you still need to safety plan, you still need to educate, it could be that it was something where the child just really wasn't impacted by it, especially maybe if it was like an inappropriate touch by another child or something, or if it was a one-time event or the severity of the event. They may have really good coping skills. They may be able to discuss how they're feeling already. It may not need that specialized therapy for it. We also give assessments. We give assessments to caregivers so that we're not just getting the feedback from the children of how they're doing, because a lot of times they might minimize, they might be avoidant, They might not even recognize that they're experiencing trauma. So we also want to give those trauma assessments to the caregivers, to the teachers, to people who see the child and would say, no, there's something going on here. They definitely have had a change, a shift in behavior since this happened. There's definitely something going on. And those symptoms are looked at by a therapist or looked at by a clinician to see, are they actually showing symptoms of trauma? And if they are, that's when we need to get them that therapy, to get them that counseling help. So some resources that we use a lot, the one I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation, which was that National Child Traumatic Stress Network. They are a great resource. They have a lot of free training, publications to give to a variety of people that work in this capacity, whether it be the actual child, the caregivers, teachers, therapists. They have things for different age ranges. There's the Mothers of Sexually Abused Children. There's prompting ourselves here, but the house next door, because we have our sexual abuse treatment program. So there are definitely resources out there and resources that can help people who are part of like the support group, who are part of the family, who are, you know, maybe the advocates for the children or the guardian ad litems for the children, or people who are working in the court system that are trying to help children or understand their cases. So there's definitely a lot of information out there if somebody wants to have that information. Hold on, let me see here. Oops. So I'm going to stop share for a minute. That is the general presentation that I give. And so the reason that we have time at the end, because literally it's only 10 o'clock. So either I talked way too fast, which can happen. I talk very fast, or you know, got very efficient with this program. But oftentimes when we're in person, I'll go around and show you different things that I use with the kids. But I want to ask for questions right now. If you have questions, I can share resources with you that I use. But anything from your perspective of your role with kids that you might have questions about. It doesn't have to be anything that's even particularly in this presentation too. And you can either unmute yourselves. I think if Chris has allowed that, you can put it in the chat box so I can see it there. But if you're thinking about it, I'm just going to grab a couple of things to kind of show you some things that I use with child clients, whether they be my sexually abused clients or other trauma clients.
Everyone should be able to unmute themselves now if you have a question.
One thing that I use with kids a lot is a feelings sheet, and actually I have that on my computer. I can share it, but this one I just got off the internet. They're called Kimochis, and they're just like little people that have little emotions next to them. So they're different faces with different emotions, and oftentimes when kids come in, I will give them the Kimochi sheet and I'll say, you know, how has your week been? What are some emotions that you've had from this week? So that's something that you don't have to be a therapist to have. You can have that on your refrigerator. I know that they have that like little smiley faces. So yes, I can share that. I'll put this to the side over here so I remember that. The other side I have is for maybe teenagers or adults, which is the feelings wheel, which they have a lot of those online if you Google them. And the thing I love about this is that it has like your basic feelings in the very middle. So that's sad, happy, mad, nervous. And then as you go out, it has more specific emotions for it. So when I'm helping adults, because don't think that you just, you know, become an adult and then all of a sudden your vocabulary expands by 100%. A lot of times people will come in and be like, yeah, I feel kind of a little bit sad, and helping them come up with the actual words for it. So do you feel sad? Do you feel in despair? Do you feel lonely? Do you feel empty? Trying to get more specific with it so that you can help them understand what that emotion is, but also get a better understanding for yourself of how to help somebody. There are tons of books to help kids understand trauma. Some basic ones they have are things like no trespassing, this is my body, and this goes into body safety, like that they are in charge of their bodies, what are private parts and not private parts, what are appropriate and inappropriate touch. And they're, out of all the books we have, like those are the ones that we have a lot of, is the psychoeducation about appropriate and inappropriate touch in bodies. For children who, doesn't have to be trauma, but there's some kids that keep getting into people's personal spaces and kind of being inappropriate about it, or just kind of like in your space. So there's this one called Personal Space Camp, and it's by Julia Cook. And Julia Cook has a lot of series of books for different behavioral issues, but the Personal Space Camp is very nice and helps children kind of understand, like, about hula hoop of like personal space, like let's stay in our space. I think that having COVID and having that 6 feet rule has actually helped a lot with kids understanding personal space, but there's some more information on that. One that's good for all kinds of trauma that I love is called Healing Days. And it says, a guide for kids who have experienced trauma. So Healing Days doesn't just have to be sexual abuse or sexual trauma, it can be all kinds of trauma. And it kind of goes into how you can feel on a day-to-day basis after a trauma has happened or something stressful has happened. So it talks about a lot of symptoms, but it talks about it in a way that, you know, would be more applicable to kids, usually about, you know, elementary school, could be middle school too, but kind of showing and through pictures and language, those common reactions that you can have after a trauma has occurred. Make sure I have that. Dun, dun, dun. Another thing I use to talk about trauma symptoms is called Once I Was Very, Very Scared. And it is by, I think it's Chandra Ghosh Ippen. She has a couple of books actually. And this one I like because it deals with animals. And so all of the different trauma symptoms that different animals have. And for some reason, kids love it when things are like one step removed, like if there's a puppet or there's through a book. And so in this one, you have all these animals who have gone through different traumas, and they're talking about their reactions to the traumas. And sometimes you don't really know what the trauma is specifically, but all the different animals are having different reactions, and kids will recognize them or say, like, I felt that too. It talks about what you can do when you have those feelings, that it teaches about different coping skills that each of the animals learned. So this is a good one just for any kind of trauma in general or anything really stressful. Let's see. Even things that just do kind of relaxation for kids. So this is one that's talking about meditations, and it has more like colorful pictures and stories to teach about relaxation. And they have tons of ones like these, like Who Has What, which is all about girls' bodies and boys' bodies. And so depending on the age of the child, there is a book that will apply to that. And not just books, but there's great videos out there and things on, obviously, YouTube if we're talking about videos, but links that kind of help kids learn about trauma, learn about relaxation. Sesame Street has a great deep breathing video with Elmo called Belly Breathe. So there's a lot of resources out there for the different kinds of coping skills that they can learn, or learning what trauma is. Let's see. Again, there's other ones that talk about private parts. My private parts are private. And this is for a little bit older elementary school age. And the reason that I like this one is because besides talking about the information, it also makes a game out of it. Like, can you spot where these things are in the picture? And so it kind of takes away a little bit of the stress and anxiety when kids are learning about these things, because they can show trauma symptoms even when they're hearing about trauma or hearing about abuse, even if we're not talking about their specific abuse. This one's great for teaching kids about boundaries, consent, respect. It's I don't know if it's a series, but it says, let's talk about body boundaries, consent, and respect. And so it's a book to teach children about body ownership, respectful relationships, feelings and emotions, choices, and recognizing bully behaviors. And again, some of these books are, you can basically use them over a period of time. Like some of them are kind of longer, so they might not be able to get everything at once, or if they're younger, you might be able to paraphrase or summarize what's going on. I'm going to look for that Kamochi sheet really quick so I can show you guys. And while I do that, does anybody have any questions? Let me find that. Hold on, I'll close this. Make sure I don't lose you guys. What's on this side? Okay.
Are we going to receive a list of the books that you shared?
Yes, I can definitely do that if you would like. I can send it into the coordinator of the event, and she can send it out. Chris, do you know if there's if we get like a list of who attended the event so that we know who to send the information to?
There should, when they registered for each of the sessions, there'll be a list, and I can definitely have Kaja send that to you. So you
Perfect.
can that.
So, yeah, once I get the list of everybody's email addresses, I can send the list of the books that I shared along with some other books. Where's the feelings committee? Okay, let me go back to this one. Let me share the screen again. So you can see from here, it literally was just like a free PDF that I found online, and they actually make these kimochis. They make these little animals, not animals, I don't know what to call them, these little characters. And so I have some of them actually in my office, and all my kids like to squeeze them and stuff. Speaking of which, let me show you some fidgets. So I have an entire cart of stuff, but I'll kind of just show you some of the stuff that I like to show kids and that kids seem to like a lot. So one thing that they are obsessed with, and I'll stop sharing with this. There's no actual word for this. It's like a water maze or something. We used to have them when we were kids, but adults, kids, they love to sit there and watch this. It's kind of like a little soothing thing. So whether it's this little Nemo dude going around the circle, or it's just one that has like two colors. It's also great for caregivers or other people to have at their offices and their homes. So kind of gives something for kids to kind of stare at if they feel uncomfortable, or to relax to. So sometimes you'll tell them, okay, I want you to sit there and just kind of calm down and kind of just watch the water until it goes all the way down. Or there's one that like there's two colors and they're kind of racing and you're kind of seeing which color is going to win. We do things in session where we make things called like calming jars or mind jars. So they make these little glitter jars, and it's supposed to represent kind of their minds and how they become clouded when there's mixed emotions. This is another good tool for time out or calm down time. So they swish it up with all the emotions they're feeling, and then they watch it. It's like a little tornado that happens, and then they keep practicing like their breathing until all of the glitter goes down to the bottom, which takes a couple minutes, which is really helpful. These are my little kimochi people. So I do have the kimochis, and For some kids, they just can kind of look at it and tell you that the yes, that's mad. And then there's also the word on the back, which doesn't have to be that actual word. They love that. If you are familiar with Inside Out, I can't tell you how often kids love looking at the Inside Out characters, taking the characters, telling you which characters they think are that they like the best. Anger has hit a lot of things in my office. Anger has pushed over people. Sadness has done a lot of things. So there's like a little set of the Inside Out characters that are super helpful to have. And they even have, yes, I can send out a copy of the PowerPoint as well. Bubbles are also great for teaching kids about, this is like the tiniest bubble thing in the world, but teaching them about deep breathing, because to get the largest bubble, it's done by giving the slowest breath, so that deep breathing, and kind of teaches them the way to breathe correctly. I like have one of these little things where you have to like search for little items. So kids and adults just like to fidget. Sometimes it just makes them feel comfortable, so they just kind of sit there and fidget with different things. And as long as they're able to kind of keep attention and keep concentrated, like I don't mind fidgeting at all. This is called a tangle, and the thing is it doesn't actually tangle. So you can twist it up and you can turn it around. You actually can break the pieces apart. They go back together, but it's really nice because it doesn't actually tangle, but it gives them something to fidget with, and just kind of, even during like presentations like this, when I'm watching my own presentations, not my own presentations, but I'm watching trainings, I'll sit there and fidget with things because I have to fidget. It would drive me nuts. Or I make like little, or I draw. I'll sit there and draw when I'm trying to pay attention. But there's a lot of things you can do to make kids and adults more comfortable when they've gone through something that's traumatic. And little fidgets like that are one of the things. And working with kids and teaching them using puppets and teaching them using books, it's like one step removed, so they don't feel as embarrassed or as nervous about doing things. So I will send out the presentation. I will send out the list of common books that I have. I'll send some links for some fidgets, most of which come straight from Amazon, or I'm sure you can find them other places. Walmart has some too. I think that was all the things. So I'll basically put down the kind of like the starter kit that we use when we're working with kids in a lot of different capacities. It doesn't have to be just sexual abuse. A lot of times if kids have been through sexual abuse, they've been through more than one type of abuse or trauma. So it definitely helps all kids. Ooh, this thing. Go to Walmart, go wherever you want. This little wand thing. Ooh, they love it. I don't know what to tell you. It's not electronic. It doesn't play any games, but they will sit there and watch that wand for a long time. Let's see, I'm looking at the bottom. I think that Chris put something there, but you can also, okay, so I will get the PowerPoint to you guys. I'll get the list of everybody's emails to send out, and make sure that I have all those things. Oops, I did press the wrong button there. Yeah, if anybody needs anything else, they'll have my contact information that you guys can contact me if you want to ask me specific questions, maybe about a case you're working on. Are we supposed to enter our name and email? Oh no, Chris said that when you enter this Zoom presentation that it records that you entered it, so your information has already been taken from you, probably with your permission, I think. So we have that information, so you don't have to enter it again. I'll just get a list of all the people that actually attended and send it out to them. But yeah, if you have specific questions that you would like to ask me about a child you're working with or a potential situation, we will have my contact information for that. So I was thorough, didn't take up the whole 2 hours. You have some extra time. You can go drink your coffee, get ready for the next presentation, use the bathroom, all those self-care things that we often do not do between things, or we run from one session to the next. So I encourage you to use the next 35 minutes to do something like that. Chris, do we have any other housekeeping things we need to do?
Fantastic.
Oh, you're muted.
I just
You're still
sent a
muted.
link in the chat to go back to the event platform to find your next session. Thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Christina, for a fantastic presentation. And I sent you a message about Kaja to get your participant list so we can send everything out to everybody. Thanks everybody for attending.
Well, thank you guys for your time this morning. I hope you have a great rest.
Fantastic. Thank you all.